Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Fringe North podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Caitlin Townsend. My pronouns are she and her, and I am the project coordinator for this year's festival. And I have with me here today Keegan. Keegan, would you like to take some time to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your submission for the festival this year?
I would. Thank you, Caitlin. My name is Keegan MacNeil-Kettle. My pronouns are he, him. I'm from North Bay, Ontario, and my submission this year is called Quarantine Bops, which I market as a cabaret from the comfort of your own couch.
Awesome, that sounds really exciting. So what led to this particular project and what was the inspiration behind it?
The inspiration kind of started from, I want to say, a few years ago when I did a show called One Man, All Woman, which was a cabaret style that used musical theater songs to sort of like help tell a story. So when I was creating this show, I decided that I would actually make it as a love letter to musical theater because that's where I got my start of my acting career.
Oh, that's awesome. So how long have you been in the acting space and when did that all begin?
I've been, oh my God, hard question. I've been acting since I want to say around 13 years old. That was when I first did my very first show. With the Fringe, I've been doing it since I was 16.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
I've been doing that for 11 years now at this point.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So having that like vast experience with fringes, how have you kind of navigated the shift to things being digital and what has changed like through this is actually kind of two different questions, but what has changed through the years prior to the shift to digital as well and just like um, the way that you interact with your art and that.
I find that things have just sort of taken a more liberal turn artistically. Like there are a lot of more like contents being explored that 10, 15 years ago you probably wouldn't really see at like a local fringe festival. But now I find that like there's more open inclusivity when it comes to projects.
Well, that's great to hear. And so then looking specifically at the shift to digital now that we're living through a global pandemic, what have you found unique about the fringe, or I guess again, two kind of pieces here, the digital shift in general, but then also in the fringe environment, because the fringe environment is kind of unique and a special artistic place that I just really enjoy compared to, it has its own flavor, I guess is the way to put it.
Yeah, it does have its own flavor. I find that it's just even though French is just so accessible to a lot more people since it's been moved to a digital format. It's become more accessible to everyone who may not live in town or may not have time to go see a show during that time period. I know a lot of the theater stuff that's happening here in North Bay. They've switched to digital stuff, and it's been accessed from people as close to Sudbury and as far away from Washington D.C.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. It's really
Yeah.
exciting. Yeah, so with being in Northern Ontario, and it is a very unique place for artists in terms of uh, opportunities just sometimes look a little different in the north than compared to big cities for the arts. So how do you find navigating that as an artist?
In all honesty, it's very. I find I'm not gonna say it's easy because I'm a predominantly I identify as a queer performance art, so I identify LGBTQ concepts and sort of that sort of culture into my work, so it has like a different, unique telling to
That's
it.
awesome.
But it's been really interesting seeing the response. It's always been very positive when it comes to people watching this and they come out learning something new that they didn't already know or sort of being reminded of something that they may have known a long time ago but they just haven't thought of in a long time.
That's awesome and really exciting to hear. In terms of like, because I know like the term cabaret and this piece in particular is a cabaret piece. Um, I'm not really familiar as to like what sets a cabaret apart from like other musicals and like what is the I guess for people who don't know that term very well, like what is that genre that's unique about it?
I think what's unique about concept of cabaret, it started from kind of like with Fringe. It started in like clubs, nightclubs, and restaurant spaces where it could just mold and form these, and these people just come together and create some sort of unique conceptual art piece that they could easily perform at like a restaurant one night when it's died down and there's some people just sitting down and wanting to enjoy a piece of theater.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really exciting. Yeah. So in terms of, um, you've been in the fringe circuit for a long time, so I'm kind of curious as to what have been some of your like highlight experiences over those years, and uh, yeah, what have you most enjoyed about being in that artistic space?
Um, I think like most memorable for me is my again going back to my very first Fringe experience when I was like 16 years old. I was my first it was during the middle of grade 10 finals. So whenever I was doing like my final exams, I'd write that in the morning. I'd go home, I'd eat something quick, and then I would rush down to the theater and do like one or two show performances for the Fringe Festival in London, Ontario.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a lot of dedication.
Yes.
Yeah.
Another highlight was a few years ago for my show I mentioned previously, One Man, All Woman, where it was we performed it there, and there was a lot of parents who took their kids that were interested in like LGBTQ content, like RuPaul's Drag Race, where in North Bay, Ontario, you wouldn't find that per se because it's not available all the time.
Mhm.
And I actually got a message from a mom who took her son, I believe, to the fourth performance. She said that he walked out of it thinking, this is what I want to do. This is what
That's
I
awesome.
aspire to be. This is what I love to watch.
That's amazing. Those heartfelt stories are like the best when art inspires others to like jump into that artistic space and to see it in themselves and to see what's possible. Because I think in the arts, there's a lot in culture of like, oh, like, you have to be like really special to be able to make it in the arts, but to see how like, no, you can do this for a career and you can like this can be your life, and yeah, you can express yourself in these different ways and get paid for it, which is like wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. It was. I remember that when I got the message, it was before my final performance, and I was like, "Oh, I shouldn't have read this. I'm getting emotional now. I can't. I can't look at this. Put it away."
Yeah, and trying to get back to like that neutral, like I need to act now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so much fun. Yeah, so in terms of like you started relatively young in the fringe space as well. So we do have a lot of young artists who are starting and getting their foot in the door this year. So what kinds of like inspiration or suggestions would you have for them as they like I guess come into their own as artists?
Have fun. In all honesty, just have fun. Yes, it's at the end of the day, it is work. There should be a bit of professionalism, but at the same time, though, you get to play dress up for a living, and you get to experience this with a group of other people. So I find that is the best part about be doing a fringe show is you get to meet whole different type of people, and you get to experience something much bigger than all of us.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. Yeah. It it's like this artistic force that just has a life of its own.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, in terms of this particular submission and the piece for your this festival, what are you hoping that audience goers gain from it? And, is there anything that might surprise them in any way or, any unique, without giving away too much, I guess, but, like, any, things that will set your show apart from other shows and reasons to attend this year?
I like. I think what's kind of sets mine up more is like I'm using a mix of like old classic Broadway shows that you recognize the music from, but I'm also like incorporating a lot of like the newer stuff that the current generation is might be interested in watching at the same time. So for people who are very familiar with Broadway and they watch more like the old contemporary, like the old classics, they kind of get like a sense of what the face of musical theater is kind of morphing into. And for the younger generation, it'll be more of a taste of what kind of music used to be performed, what kind of Broadway shows were like back when it was in a. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought there. It's just more of like kind of introducing a new generation to like these classics that they may not recognize.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that's really awesome in terms of like going back to the roots, but also like seeing where we're headed with things too, right? Like it's the full spectrum of this is where it began and this is where it's going, which is really cool.
Exactly.
Mhm. Yeah, so as an artist, what are you hoping to get out of being involved in this year's festival, and what are you most looking forward to?
I'm aside from being able to do my perform my work in front of new, fresh, and new faces, also getting to experience like the other shows of the Fringe. That was another part of Fringe I always enjoyed. Whenever I was either taking part in or just watching, I would always enjoy seeing what sort of other performances might be popping up during the whole festival.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, it's always neat to see like what creativity everyone brings to the table and um, just like those things that inspire you to then go back and think and reflect on how you can like use different elements in your own art too, I think is really fun and uh, just that community behind the Fringe. I think that that's one of the main things that I really love about the Fringe flavor that we were talking about before is that sense of community and that we're all here to support each other. We're not in competition of one another. Uh, yeah, I just really love that element. Yeah. Yeah. So how's you've been in the artistic space for several years, like have you found that your approach to art has shifted over the years in terms of like your process of yeah, like how you approach creating shows?
Yeah, yes and no. Yes and no. I always write sort of when it comes to my creative process, I always write it and then perform it typically. But then I find throughout the years, it's kind of like I would always see what sort of is new and current and seeing how I can incorporate that into my new pieces. And also at the same time, sort of incorporating like bits of my own personality into these characters to sort of create a much more three-dimensional performance.
Mhm. Yeah, so when you talk about like incorporating bits of your own like personality and who you are into these characters, what approach do you take to that in terms of is it kind of like a full combination or is it like different sides of yourself that show up in different characters or do each of them kind of reflect, I guess, the inner core of you in some way?
It's kind of like it's a mix of taking certain events that happened to me growing up and then incorporating that into my characters. And then also taking bits of my personality as well and then just infusing them with that certain flavor that could really bring them off the page.
Yeah, that's really exciting. So with that in mind, so you do everything from like writing, production, and uh, like the actual like acting as well? Like you do everything yourself, or how's your approach to that?
Um, yeah, I do it all. I write it, I produce it myself, and then I perform it.
Nice, that's really exciting. So with that in mind, do you have a favorite part of the process, I guess, of the writing or producing or the acting space? Like, what is your, and I know they're all kind of different, so it's a hard question in terms of, um, and maybe if you like them all, like, what is your favorite part of each element, I guess?
I think my favorite part is it would have to be the writing part because because if I get excited about some piece, then I'm like, okay, this I'm on to something, and then I just try to flesh it out from there. And if I'm not excited about it, I'm like, maybe I'm gonna go take this back to the drawing board and see if there's any way I can change this, make this a little bit more spicier in a sense,
Mhm. Yeah, thanks for sharing.
and then and then performing it in general is just like super fun. It's like the biggest adrenaline rush you could ever get.
Mhm. Yeah, I understand that. Yeah. In terms of like adding different events from your life into these different, I guess, scenarios that characters are going through, do you ever find it like a difficult process in any way, or is it kind of like a because I know for some artists it's like a healing journey, whereas for others it's more of a like uh, just get to poke fun at the things that we've been through and like what is your kind of approach there?
Um, in the beginning, it was very like therapeutic, like a healing journey. But then as I started diving more into into my writing, like especially when it comes to like doing comedic pieces, it's very much just like poking fun of like, oh, I did this, I did that. What was I thinking? Dyeing my hair neon pink.
Yeah, all those things that we're all like, oh, I was so young back then and did such foolishness. But I
Yes.
think we all have those moments in our life somewhere along the way.
Yes. And I'm
Yeah.
so glad Instagram wasn't invented around that time, because that would have come back to haunt me to this very day.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, I think this generation is definitely going to face that fact of like there is no saving face. Like we have that option of kind of like, oh, that never happened. Which in
Exactly.
some ways is a benefit because then you learn how to be okay with the fact that we're all human and have those ups and downs and the things in life that who we are today, we wouldn't do that now, even though back then who we were then was very excited to do those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So with everything being a digital environment this year, how are you feeling in regards to like, because I know for a lot of people, like the heart of theater is very much feeling the energy in the room, which is a lot different in the digital environment. And for some people, like they're finding a lot of really unique ways to use the camera in different ways. So I'm wondering, sort of both the ups and downs of how shifting to digital has been.
Um, it it's been interesting. It's really interesting when you're doing a performance and you don't get that audience reaction that you're typically used to when it comes to live theater. But at the same time, though, it's really nice because you kind of are like, you kind of have to think, okay, this is funny to me. How am I still going to portray that comedy even without without an audience laughter?
Mm, yeah. Yeah, and in particular with comedy, are you someone who like I know certain actors really feed off of that hearing the laughter and then they're able to get kind of more into the character. How has that shift been in terms of not having like that feedback?
It's very once I it's been interesting to say the least, but I tend to think I'm a pretty funny person. You know, that's what my mom says. She says I'm the funniest person she knows. So it's just kind of, I'm just kind of having to just remember to trust my instincts, what I'm doing. If I think it's funny and I know it's not pushing the boundary too far, then I'm good.
Mm, yeah, I think that trusting of instincts is so important in the digital realm and just being able to back yourself rather than getting that feedback and sort of like I mean, not that it's wrong to like build off of that feedback in a when we're in a space where we're on stage and people are actually physically with us, but to just be able to have that like it's a different type of confidence, I think, if I can say it
Hmm.
that way. Yeah. 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 So what are you hoping to get out of being involved in this festival this year? And yeah, like has an artist, what are you hoping to um enjoy and just like the process of Fringe as well as the festival itself? What are you hoping to gain by being involved with Fringe North?
I'm very excited to work with a different fringe, because for the past few years I've been working with doing performances for On the Edge Fringe here in North Bay, Ontario.
Mhm.
So I think being a part of a different fringe festival and kind of seeing their methods of madness and how they do things, it's going to be very interesting and sort of eye-opening, but also very entertaining, because I'm very curious and really happy to do this.
Yeah, yeah, and it is like it's interesting because like fringes have like a connective thread, but we're also unique in different ways too. So yeah, that it is really it's really cool, and I'm glad that you're getting able to experience that and to see what it's like to be involved in Fringe North. Um, is there anything else that you wanted to share with our audience before we end here today?
Um, I like pie, so if you're in North Bay, come drop off a pie.
Pie is always good. Can't go wrong with pie.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Keegan. We really appreciate you coming on. And thank you to our viewers for watching today. You can come support Keegan. And sorry, what was the title of your show again?
Quarantine bops.
Quarantine Bops. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Please come out and buy a ticket to Quarantine Bops and support Keegan. Our festival is from August 19th to the 22nd, with a sneak preview on the Wednesday night as well. So thank you for watching today. Miigwech, gracias, and merci for being part of our podcast. And thank you for your time, Keegan. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have
Thank
a
you so
great
much
day.
for having me. Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
thanks.
Have a good
Thank
day.
you. Bye. Thank you for watching our podcast. Merci, miigwech, gracias. If you like what we're doing, you can support Fringe North and the artists involved in this year's festival financially so that we can continue this work. Visit www.fringenorth.ca to find out more.